Captain Jake Martinez stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the stars slowly drift past the large windows. He had been traveling through space for 15 years, but the sight of distant suns still made him feel small and amazed. Today was different, though. Today he felt worried. "Captain, we should see New Haven in about 2 hours," said Lisa Parker, his communications officer. She was a young woman with bright eyes who usually smiled a lot. Today she looked nervous, too. Jake nodded and checked his watch. New Haven was supposed to be humanity's greatest success story. 3 years ago, 50,000 people had left Earth to build a new life on a distant planet. Families, scientists, teachers, doctors, and farmers had all worked together to create something beautiful. The reports that came back to Earth were always good news. The crops were growing well, the children were healthy, the domed cities were expanding, but then the reports stopped coming. "Any word from the surface yet?" Jake asked Lisa. She shook her head. "Nothing, Captain. I've been trying to reach them for 6 hours now. All the communication channels are completely quiet." Jake felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Space colonies always had people talking on the radio. Traffic control, weather reports, supply requests, family messages to Earth. The silence was wrong. "Take us closer," he ordered. "Full sensor sweep, Lieutenant." Commander Alex Johnson, his second in command, walked over to Jake's chair. Alex was a tall man with gray hair who had seen many battles. His face was serious. "Captain, I'm getting some strange readings on the sensors." "What kind of readings?" "The colony's main power grid is completely dead. No lights, no heat signatures from the cities, and..." Alex paused, looking at his screen again. "There are impact craters all over the surface, big ones." Jake's heart started beating faster. "Impact craters from what?" "They look like the marks left by military bombardment cannons, the kind that warships use to attack planets." The bridge became very quiet. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at Jake. He could see the fear in their eyes, the same fear he felt growing inside his own chest. "Get me a visual on the main screen," Jake ordered. The large screen at the front of the bridge flickered to life. What they saw made several crew members gasp out loud. New Haven looked like a broken toy. The beautiful domed cities that had been shown in the colony's reports were now twisted metal and melted glass. Where there should have been green fields and blue lakes, there were only black craters and gray ash. "My God," whispered Dr. Kate Robinson, the ship's doctor. She was a kind woman who had treated thousands of patients over the years, but Jake had never seen her look so shocked. "Take us down," Jake said quietly. "Landing party preparations. Full combat gear." "Sir," Alex said carefully. "If someone did this to the colony, they might still be here. Then we'll be ready for them," Jake replied. His voice was steady, but inside he felt sick. 50,000 people had lived down there. 50,000 men, women, and children who had just wanted to build a better life. The Liberty landed in what used to be the main city square. Jake led a team of 12 people down to the surface. They wore heavy armor and carried powerful weapons, but nothing could have prepared them for what they found. The colony's protective dome had been shattered into millions of pieces. The buildings inside were not just destroyed, but melted. Whatever had hit them had been incredibly hot and powerful. Jake knelt down and picked up a piece of metal that had once been part of a child's playground. It was twisted into an impossible shape. "Captain," called out Sergeant Bill Murphy, one of the Marines. "You need to see this." Jake followed Bill to what had been the colony's school. The walls were gone, but the floor was still there. Burned into the ground were the clear outlines of human bodies. Small bodies. Children who had been running when the attack came. Dr. Robinson knelt down next to one of the outlines. She took out a small device and scanned the ground. "These people were vaporized instantly," she said in a shaking voice. "The heat was so intense that it burned their shadows into the floor." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. He had seen war before, but this was different. This was not a battle between soldiers. This was the murder of innocent people. "Keep searching," he ordered. Look for any survivors, any clues about who did this. For 3 hours, they searched through the ruins. They found no survivors. They found no one left alive at all. But they did find evidence of what had happened. In the colony's command center, Alex discovered the remains of the defense computers. Captain, I can still access some of the security records. The attack came from space. Multiple ships, firing, continuously for over an hour. Do we know who? Jake asked. Alex worked at the broken computer for several minutes. Finally, he looked up with anger in his eyes. The weapon signatures matched Zephyrian technology. This was the hegemony. Jake had heard of the Zephyrian hegemony. They were an alien empire that controlled dozens of star systems. Humans had met them once before, several years ago. The meeting had not gone well, but there had been no fighting. Jake had thought they were just another alien race trying to survive in a big galaxy. "Sir," called out Private Jenny Lee from across the room. "I found something else." She led them to a large open area that had once been the colony's main park. Now it was a field of black glass, melted sand that had cooled into smooth, dark stone. But in the center of the glass field, there were rows of small metal objects. Jake walked closer and realized what they were. Dog tags. Identification tags that every colonist wore. Thousands of them arranged in perfect lines. They gathered them here, Dr. Robinson said in a whisper. After the bombing, there were survivors. The Zephyrians came down and collected all, the people who were still alive. Jake picked up one of the tags. It belonged to Chris Thompson, the colony's administrator. Jake remembered Chris from the reports he had sent back to Earth. He had been so proud of what they were building on New Haven. In his last message, Chris had shown pictures of his 2 young daughters playing in the colony's gardens. "They executed them," Jake said, his voice filled with cold rage. "After destroying their homes, they lined them up and executed them like animals." The landing party stood in silence, looking at the thousands of identification tags. Each one represented a person who had died far from home, killed by aliens who had shown no mercy. Jake picked up his radio and contacted the Liberty. "This is Captain Martinez. Prepare for immediate departure. We're returning to Earth." "What should I put in the log, Captain?" asked Lisa over the radio. Jake looked around at the destroyed colony one more time. He thought about the children's shadows burned into the school floor. He thought about Chris Thompson and his daughters. He thought about 50,000 people who had trusted that the galaxy was big enough for everyone to live in peace. "Write this," Jake said. "New Haven colony has been completely destroyed. No survivors. Evidence suggests systematic execution of civilians by Zephyrian forces. Recommend immediate military response." As the Liberty lifted off from the dead world, Jake stood at the window and watched New Haven disappear behind them. The Zephyrians had wanted to send a message to humanity. They had succeeded. But Jake had a feeling they were not going to like humanity's response. The news from New Haven hit Earth like a hammer blow. Within hours of Captain Martinez's report reaching Earth Command, the images and videos were being broadcast across every human world in the solar system. People stopped what they were doing and watched in horror as the camera showed the melted buildings, the burned shadows of children, and the rows of identification tags in the glass field. President Helen Brooks sat in her office, watching the footage for the 10th time. She was a strong woman who had led Earth through many difficult times, but the tears on her face showed that even she could not stay calm after seeing what had happened to the colonists. Across from her desk sat Admiral Rick Stone, the commander of Earth's military forces. "How many people are calling for war?" she asked him. "All of them," Rick replied. He was an old soldier with scars on his hands and gray in his beard. "The phone lines are jammed. Every military recruitment office has lines going around the block. People are demanding we do something." Helen nodded. She had expected this. Humans did not take kindly to the murder of their children. "What do we have available?" Rick pulled out a thick folder and set it on her desk. "We can put together the largest fleet in human history. 12 dreadnought battleships, 36 heavy cruisers, and over 200 support ships. Every military shipyard in the system is working around the clock." "That's not enough," Helen said firmly. "If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. I want every experimental weapon we've been working on, every new technology we've been afraid to use. The Zephyrians wanted to show us what they could do. Now we're going to show them what happens when you murder human families." 2 days later, Dr. Sam Carter was pulled out of his laboratory and brought to a secure military facility. Sam was a thin man with messy hair who preferred working with equations to talking with people. He had spent the last 5 years developing weapons that he hoped would never be used. "Dr. Carter," Admiral Stone said as they walked through the underground complex, "we need Project Prometheus operational immediately." Sam stopped walking. "Sir, those weapons aren't ready for deployment. They're too powerful. We designed them for destroying asteroids, not fighting wars." "The Zephyrians destroyed an entire colony full of civilians," Rick replied. "They lined up families and executed them. I'd say that calls for our most powerful weapons." Sam was quiet for a moment. He had seen the footage from New Haven, too. The image of those small shadows on the school floor would stay with him forever. "How long do I have?" 6 weeks. Can you do it?" Sam looked around at the dozens of scientists and engineers who were already working on the project. "We'll make it work," he said. "But Admiral, once we put these weapons on ships, there's no going back. These can crack planets open." "Good," Rick said. "Maybe it's time the galaxy learned to fear us instead of the other way around." Meanwhile, Captain Martinez was dealing with his own preparations. The USS Liberty was being completely rebuilt with new weapons, better armor, and stealth systems that would let them move through enemy space without being detected. As he watched the workers installing the new equipment, he thought about the colonists of New Haven. "Captain," said Lisa Parker, walking up to him. She looked different now. The cheerful young woman had been replaced by someone harder, angrier. "I've been analyzing the communication logs from other human colonies. I think there might be more attacks." Jake turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" 3 other colonies have gone dark in the last month. No communications, no supply requests, nothing. Command assumed it was equipment problems. But now, we know better," Jake finished. "The Zephyrians aren't just testing us, they're hunting us." Lisa nodded. "I think New Haven was just the beginning. They want to wipe out every human settlement outside of Earth." Jake felt the anger burning in his chest grow stronger. It wasn't enough that they had killed 50,000 innocent people. The aliens wanted to destroy every human who dared to leave their home planet. "Get me Admiral Stone," he said. 20 minutes later, Jake was on a video call with the Admiral. "Sir, we need to move faster. If Parker is right, there are other colonies under attack right now." Rick's face was grim. "I know, Captain. We've lost contact with New Geneva and Port Armstrong. Rescue ships are on their way, but I don't think they're going to find anyone alive." "Then we stop playing defense," Jake said. "Let me take the Liberty and a small fleet. We'll scout ahead and find out where the Zephyrians are planning to strike next." "Absolutely not," Rick replied. "I'm not sending you out there alone. You wait for the main fleet." "Sir, every day we wait is another day they might attack another colony. How many more families have to die while we're building ships?" Rick was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he sighed. "You'll have escort ships. And Captain, if you find the enemy, you call for backup. Don't try to be a hero." "I'm not trying to be a hero, sir. I'm trying to stop a genocide." As the weeks passed, Earth transformed itself into a military machine unlike anything in human history. Factories that had made civilian goods were converted to produce weapons and armor. Retired soldiers came out of retirement. Young people who had never held a gun signed up to fight. The entire human race was preparing for war. Commander Beth Williams worked day and night in the intelligence center, trying to learn everything she could about the Zephyrian hegemony. What she found made her blood run cold. "Admiral," she said, bursting into Rick's office with a folder full of documents. "I've been analyzing alien communication intercepts. The attack on New Haven wasn't random." Rick looked up from the ship, deployment plans he had been studying. "What do you mean?" "The Zephyrians have been watching human expansion for years. They see us as a threat to their empire. New Haven was a test to see how we would respond to the complete destruction of a civilian population." "A test?" Beth nodded. They wanted to see if we would surrender, negotiate, or fight back. Based on our response, they would decide whether to offer us terms or try to wipe us out completely. Rick leaned back in his chair. And what was their conclusion? They're planning to destroy every human settlement outside of the solar system. They call it competitive exclusion. They believe the galaxy isn't big enough for both humans and Zephyrians. Rick stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the massive shipyards where humanity's revenge fleet was taking shape. Then they're going to learn that they picked the wrong species to try to eliminate. Sir, there's more. Intelligence suggests they've done this before, to other alien races. We've found evidence of at least 7 different civilizations that the Zephyrians have completely destroyed over the last century. 7 entire species. Gone. Every man, woman, and child. Wiped out because the Zephyrians decided they were too dangerous to be allowed to exist. Rick felt a cold fury settle in his chest. The Zephyrians weren't just humanity's enemy. They were monsters who had been murdering entire civilizations for decades. 6 weeks after the discovery of New Haven's destruction, humanity's revenge fleet was ready to launch. 12 massive battleships, each one carrying enough firepower to level a continent. 36 cruisers designed for speed and long-range combat. 200 support ships filled with marines, supplies, and the experimental weapons that Dr. Carter had promised. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship, the USS Retribution, as the fleet prepared to leave Earth's orbit. Around him, his crew worked quietly and efficiently. These were professional soldiers who knew they were about to fight a war unlike any in human history. Admiral, his communications officer reported, "All ships report ready for departure." Rick looked out, at Earth one last time. Somewhere down there, families were saying goodbye to their sons and daughters. Parents were praying that their children would come home safely. He thought about the families of New Haven who would never have that chance. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Operation Vengeance is now active. All ships, jump to hyperspace." As the human fleet disappeared into the darkness between the stars, Rick spoke into his personal log recorder. "The Zephyrians wanted to teach humanity fear. They murdered our children thinking we would beg for mercy. Instead, they're about to learn what happens when you declare war on the human race. They wanted to show us their power. Now we're going to show them ours." The largest military force in human history was heading towards Zephyrian space, carrying with it the anger of an entire species, and the promise that the massacre at New Haven would never happen again. The human fleet moved through space like a pack of hunting wolves. Captain Martinez flew ahead in the USS Liberty, now equipped with the most advanced stealth technology Earth had ever built. His job was to find the enemy and report back to Admiral Stone's main force. For 2 weeks they traveled deeper into Zephyrian territory. What they found shocked everyone aboard the Liberty. "Captain," said Lieutenant Dan Foster, the ship's science officer, "you need to see this." Jake walked over to Dan's station where multiple screens showed data from the planets they had been scanning. Dan was a young man who usually got excited about discovering new things, but today he looked sick. "What am I looking at?" Jake asked. "Dead worlds, sir. 7 of them so far. Each one shows the same pattern as New Haven. Orbital bombardment followed by ground executions. But these aren't human colonies." Jake studied the readings more carefully. "How long ago?" "The most recent was about 10 years ago. The oldest goes back almost a century. Captain, I think we've found the graveyards of entire alien civilizations." The bridge became very quiet. Jake thought about what Commander Williams had told them back on Earth. The Zephyrians had been doing this for a long time. They had been murdering entire species for decades. "Get me Admiral Stone," Jake ordered. A few minutes later, Admiral Stone's face appeared on the main screen. He was aboard the USS Retribution, still several days behind Jake's position. "What do you have for me, Captain?" "Sir, the intelligence reports were right. We've found evidence of multiple genocides. The Zephyrians have been systematically destroying any species they consider a threat." Rick's face grew darker. "How many?" "At least 7 that we can confirm. Billions of innocent people, Admiral. Men, women, children, entire families wiped out because the Zephyrians decided they were too dangerous to live." "Any sign of current Zephyrian forces?" Jake nodded. We've detected a patrol fleet about 6 hours from our current position. 12 ships, mostly cruisers and destroyers. They seem to be patrolling the border of what they consider their territory. Perfect, Rick said with a cold smile. It's time to announce our arrival. Captain Walsh, are you ready? Captain Susan Walsh commanded the heavy cruiser USS Vengeance, one of the fastest ships in the human fleet. She was a tough woman who had been fighting in space battles for 15 years. Ready and waiting, Admiral. My crew is hungry for payback. Then go show the Zephyrians what happens when they murder human children. Captain Martinez, stay back and observe. I want to know how they fight. Jake watched from a safe distance as Captain Walsh's ship moved toward the Zephyrian patrol. The aliens had no idea what was coming. Their ships moved in lazy patterns, clearly, not expecting any trouble in their own territory. The USS Vengeance appeared suddenly from behind an asteroid, its weapons already charging. The Zephyrians were caught completely off guard. This is Captain Susan Walsh of the United Earth Navy. Susan broadcast on all frequencies. You are responsible for the murder of 50,000 human civilians. Surrender now, or be destroyed. The Zephyrian response was exactly what Jake expected. Instead of surrendering, they opened fire immediately. Their weapons were powerful, designed to destroy planets and space stations. But they had never fought humans before. What happened next shocked the Zephyrians completely. Instead of running away when her ship was damaged, Captain Walsh ordered her crew to ram the nearest enemy vessel. The USS Vengeance, its hull cracked and bleeding air, crashed into the Zephyrian cruiser at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire and metal, but that was just the beginning. 2 more human cruisers appeared from different directions. When the Zephyrians tried to surround them, the human ships fought with a fury that the aliens had never seen before. When their weapons were damaged, human crews used their ships as weapons. When they were outnumbered, they fought harder instead of retreating. Within an hour, the entire Zephyrian patrol was destroyed. 3 human ships were lost, but they had taken down 12 enemy vessels. My God, whispered Lisa Parker as they watched the battle recordings. They don't know how to fight us. Jake nodded. The Zephyrians are used to fighting species that surrender when they're outgunned. They've never fought anyone who gets angrier when they're losing. 2 days later, the main human fleet arrived. Admiral Stone's massive battleships filled the space around Jake's position. The sight of 12 dreadnoughts floating in formation was both beautiful and terrifying. Admiral, reported Commander Tony Rodriguez, who led the fleet's marine forces, we've captured a damaged Zephyrian ship from the battle. There are survivors. Rick's eyes lit up. Perfect. Bring them aboard the Retribution. I want to have a conversation with them. The Zephyrian prisoners were unlike anything humans had seen before. They were tall, thin creatures with gray skin and large black eyes. When they were brought before Admiral Stone, they seemed confused and frightened. Why do you fight when you cannot win? Asked their leader, a ship commander named Vex Kalar. Your species should understand that resistance is pointless. Rick studied the alien carefully. You murdered 50,000 of our people. Did you think we would simply accept that? It was a demonstration of power, Vex Kalar replied. Your species was expanding too quickly. You needed to be taught your place in the galaxy. And what place is that? Extinct, the Zephyrian said simply. Like all the others who challenged our dominance. Rick felt his anger building, but he kept his voice calm. Tell me about Zephyr Prime. Vex Kalar looked surprised. You cannot reach our homeworld. Our defenses are too strong. Our fleet is too large. Where is it? I will not betray my people. Rick nodded to Commander Rodriguez, who stepped forward with a datapad. We don't need you to tell us. We found the location in your ship's navigation computer. Zephyr Prime, 17 light-years from here. Population 12 billion. Defended by a fleet of 300 ships. The Zephyrians' large eyes grew even wider. You cannot be planning to attack our homeworld. That would be madness. Madness? Rick asked. You destroyed 7 entire civilizations. You murdered billions of innocent people across a century of genocide. And you think attacking your homeworld is madness? We are the dominant species in this galaxy, Vex Kalar said desperately. It is our right to eliminate threats to our expansion. Not anymore, Rick replied. Your species has had its turn at the top of the food chain, now it's our turn. Rick turned to his communications officer. Send a message to all human ships. Prepare for Operation Final Lesson. Target, Zephyr Prime. As the human fleet began, moving toward the Zephyrian homeworld, Rick made one final broadcast to his forces. For too long, the Zephyrians have terrorized this galaxy. They have destroyed entire civilizations because they believed might made right. They murdered our families because they thought we would be too weak to respond. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show the galaxy that humanity will not tolerate genocide. Today, we end the Zephyrian hegemony forever. The largest human military force in history set course for the heart of enemy territory. Behind them, they left the wreckage of Zephyrian ships and the promise that the massacre at New Haven would be the last atrocity the aliens would ever commit. Jake Martinez watched the fleet move past his position, each ship carrying the anger of an entire species. The Zephyrians had wanted to teach humanity about power. They were about to learn that lesson themselves, but from the wrong end of human weapons. The hunt was over. Now came the reckoning. The Zephyrian homeworld of Zephyr Prime hung in space like a gray pearl, surrounded by the largest defensive fleet the galaxy had ever seen. 300 warships moved in careful patterns around the planet, their weapons pointed outward toward the darkness. For 100 years, no enemy had ever gotten close to this world. Admiral Rick Stone stood on the bridge of the USS Retribution, studying the enemy formations through his ship's powerful sensors. Around him, the human fleet waited in the shadow of a nearby moon, hidden from Zephyrian detection systems. It's beautiful, said Captain Amy Clark, who now commanded the assault dreadnought USS Vengeance, rebuilt and upgraded after Captain Walsh's sacrifice. 12 billion people down there who have never seen war on their own soil. Rick nodded grimly. 12 billion people whose government ordered the murder of human children. Let's see how they like having war brought to their doorstep. The plan, was simple but brutal. The human fleet would punch through the Zephyrian defenses and force the planet to surrender. Dr. Sam Carter's experimental weapons had been installed on every ship. The firepower floating in space around Rick was enough to crack continents and boil oceans. Admiral, reported the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the surface. Put it through. The main screen flickered to life, showing a Zephyrian in elaborate golden robes. This was clearly someone important, probably a government leader. I am High Chancellor Zex Morian of the Zephyrian hegemony, the alien said in careful English. We know you are here, humans. Your fleet has been detected. Rick stepped forward. I am Admiral Rick Stone of the United Earth Navy. We are here to discuss your surrender. The Zephyrian's large eyes widened in what might have been surprise or amusement. Our surrender? You are outnumbered 3-1. Your tiny fleet cannot possibly defeat our defenses. Your ships are designed to fight enemies that run away when they're losing, Rick replied. We've already destroyed 2 of your patrol fleets. Your captains don't know how to fight humans. Those were minor border skirmishes. This is our homeworld, protected by our finest warships and our most experienced commanders. Rick smiled coldly. Good. Then they'll have front row seats to watch their empire fall. The Battle of Zephyr Prime began at exactly noon, ship time. The human fleet burst from hiding like an arrow shot from a bow. 12 dreadnoughts led the charge, their massive guns already firing at the enemy defensive lines. The Zephyrians responded, exactly as Rick had expected. Their ships formed up in traditional battle formations, trying to use their superior numbers to surround and destroy the human fleet. But humans didn't fight traditional battles. Captain Martinez, now commanding a squadron of fast attack ships, led his vessels directly through the middle of the Zephyrian formation. Instead of engaging in long-range combat, the human ships closed to point-blank range and opened fire with everything they had. They're trying to ram us, shouted a Zephyrian captain over the communication channels that humans had learned to intercept. Why won't they retreat when they're damaged? Demanded another. The answer was simple. Humans fought differently because they were fighting for something different. The Zephyrians were defending territory and dominance. The humans were fighting for justice and the memory of murdered children. Captain Amy Clark's dreadnought punched through the orbital defense line like a hammer through glass. Her ship's experimental weapons, designed by Dr. Carter, fired beams of pure energy that could slice through enemy vessels like a knife through paper. "This is for New Haven," Amy broadcasted as her guns destroyed a Zephyrian battleship. "This is for all the species you murdered," added Captain Rodriguez as his Marines boarded and captured an enemy cruiser. One by one, the Zephyrian ships were destroyed or disabled. Their superior numbers meant nothing when they couldn't understand how their enemies fought. Every time a Zephyrian captain expected humans to retreat, they attacked instead. Every time the aliens tried to negotiate, human ships kept firing. Within 6 hours, the space around Zephyr Prime was filled with burning wreckage. The once mighty Zephyrian defense fleet was scattered and broken. 50 human ships had been lost, but they had destroyed over 200 enemy vessels. Admiral Stone's fleet now hung in orbit above the Zephyrian homeworld, their weapons pointed down at the surface. "High Chancellor," Rick said into his communications system. "I believe we were discussing your surrender." The response came quickly. Zex Morian appeared on screen again, but now he looked terrified instead of confident. "What are your terms?" "Complete and unconditional surrender. Your military will be disbanded. Your government will be dissolved. Your people will be placed under human supervision until we decide they can be trusted not to commit genocide again." "Impossible. We are the rulers of 30 star systems. We have been the dominant power in this region for centuries." Rick checked his watch. "You have 1 hour to accept our terms. If you refuse, we will demonstrate what our new weapons can do to planetary surfaces. You wouldn't dare destroy our world. That would make you as bad as you claim we are. Watch us." Rick nodded to Captain Clark. Her ship, the USS Vengeance, turned one of its main guns toward an empty continent on the planet's surface. The weapon, charged up, energy building until the barrel glowed white-hot. The beam that struck Zephyr Prime was visible from space. It carved a line across the continent 50 miles long and 10 miles wide, vaporizing everything in its path. Mountains were leveled. Rivers were boiled away. The scar in the planet's surface glowed red-hot and could be seen from orbit. "That was a warning shot," Rick announced. "The next one hits your capital city." 20 minutes later, High Chancellor Zex Morian contacted the human fleet again. This time, he was not alone. Dozens of other Zephyrian leaders stood behind him, all looking defeated and afraid. "We surrender," he said simply, but Rick wasn't finished. "You will also provide us with the locations of every species you have driven to extinction. You will help us build monuments to remember them, and you will explain to the galaxy exactly what you did to those innocent civilizations. We agree to your terms." Admiral Stone turned to his crew. "Signal the fleet. Zephyr Prime is secured. Begin landing operations." The occupation of the Zephyrian homeworld took 3 days. Human Marines secured government buildings, military bases, and communication centers. The Zephyrian military, once the terror of the galaxy, surrendered without firing a shot. Dr. Laura White arrived from Earth to serve as the first human administrator of occupied Zephyrian territory. She was a wise woman who had spent years studying alien cultures and governments. "Your people will be treated fairly," she told the gathered Zephyrian leaders. "But you will never again have the power to destroy other species. Those days are over." As news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy, something amazing happened. Alien civilizations that had been hiding in remote star systems for decades began sending messages to Earth. They had been too afraid of the Zephyrians to reveal themselves, but now they wanted to meet the species that had done the impossible. Captain Martinez, promoted to admiral, was given command of Earth's new deep space exploration fleet. His flagship, the USS New Haven, was built to carry diplomats and scientists as well as weapons. "Our job is to make sure this never happens again," Jake told his crew as they prepared for their first mission to contact a newly discovered alien civilization. "We're not conquerors. were protectors. 6 months after the Battle of Zephyr Prime, President Helen Brooks stood before the largest gathering of alien species in galactic history. Representatives from 24 different civilizations had come to Earth to form a new alliance, based on cooperation instead of domination. "We gather here not as conquerors and conquered," she said, "but as equals who share a common commitment to peace. The age of genocide is over. The age of cooperation has begun." On the memorial wall in Earth's capital, 50,000 names were carved in black stone. Each name represented someone who had died at New Haven Colony. Below the names, words were carved that would become humanity's promise to the galaxy. "We remember not for revenge but for responsibility. We became strong not to dominate but to protect. Let the galaxy know that while humans can forgive, we never forget. And we will never again allow the innocent to die while we have the power to prevent it." In the rebuilt colony of New Haven II, human and alien children played together in gardens, protected by orbital defense stations. The Zephyrians worked alongside other species to build instead of destroy. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about what happened when you murdered human families. Peace was possible, but only because humanity had proven they were strong enough to enforce it. The age of human protection had begun.